Death Therapy 911 and the Roll Call Room podcast present Steph and Nick's Straight Talk, Stop the Stigma. Join us every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Facebook Live. It's real, it's raw, it's uncensored. And now, here are your hosts, Steph and Nick.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first episode of Straight Talk, Stop the Stigma. I am Nick. Steph, how are you?
I'm doing well, Nick.
So, folks, this is the first one. We are super excited. We've got so much to cram into the first episode. We're going to introduce each other because there are folks that have no clue who I am. And folks that have no clue who Steph is. So, Steph, introduce yourself. Who are you? What are you? And don't scare these folks right away. Let's give them a little.
Okay.
Let's give them a little dribble. A little dribble.
All right.
All right.
So I am Stephanie Samuels, hence Steph, and been a psychotherapist for the better part of 30 years, working with law enforcement. Other first responders sprinkled in, but I'd say about 95% of my practice at this point is law enforcement. And about 15 years ago, more than that, 20 some odd years ago, actually, I wrote legislation for a hotline for retired officers to be answering the line for active officers and what have you, and ended up doing some nice grassroots work. Got some legislation passed. I was actually getting a second master's, which I'm going to get into how I drew straws on that misfortune. Got to do that one again. And for anybody that actually knows me, I'm not really big on the old education and classroom stuff. So it was a bit of a nightmare, but while I was actually going through the second master's, was able to write the legislation and did the grassroots effort, got it passed, and founded the first helpline for law enforcement. There was a bit of a mission drift, and I think it's important that people have different ideas or what have you, and I had a very set idea on what I believed would work in the country. I had spent years and years riding in police cars, not only back east, out in Los Angeles, but actually all over the country. It's my favorite thing to do when I landed, was call the police department, and it was kind of like the free way of sightseeing. So very cool.
Awesome.
So I had an idea what was going on, and then ended up years later founding Copline, which is today the only truly confidential hotline that is international for law enforcement officers and their families. So that was my truly pay forward for an amazing career that I have been blessed with. So that is the not-for-profit. And I continued to remain in private practice for many, many hours a week, just to try and deal with the multiple psychosocial stressors both on and off the job that law enforcement is experiencing. And I don't think we've seen a greater need for that than we've been seeing in the past probably 6 months with COVID, and right on through to what the hell's going on today. So.
Yeah. I agree. I think Copline and a lot of the other resources that are out there right now for first responders is probably really, really necessary, especially after the last month of protests or riots or whatever you want to call it. I was about to drop one, but we need to explain to people. So
we do.
So that's Steph. So my name is Nick. I am the host of the Roll Call Room podcast. If you don't know what the Roll Call Room podcast is, please check it out on all podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify. We're on YouTube. We're all that. I am recently the author of a brand new book called Police Mental Barricade, a survivor's guide to poor leadership in law enforcement. It is available now on ebooks, Kindle, Apple, Barnes & Noble, wherever you get ebooks. And you can pre-order the book and get an autographed book, and that'll come out August 1st. And the book is all about poor leadership in law enforcement and being a survivor of suicide. which I openly talk about because it's near and dear to my heart, and that is the reason why Steph and I started this show, was because we wanted to break the stigma of folks not talking about it. And the more of us that talk about it, that are open about it, the more of you will go get help. I'm not saying that the book is going to cure you, but it will definitely give you an idea of what I went through for a year in my agency until eventually I left. And that's a decision you need to make, especially now in the current climate. So that's Steph. That's me. This is how the show will go. We're winging it as we go along because we're just two very passionate people. So how did this all come about? Originally, Steph was going to just be a guest on the Roll Call Room. And Steph, you and I talked on the phone, and it was like talking to the female version of me, which is scary. Hence why Steph has behind her, and I have in front of me, we have designated, because we curse so much on our show, we have what's called a fuck it bucket. What is a fuck it bucket? Okay. Fuck it bucket is every time one of us says the F-bomb, we have to put $1 into the bucket. Our plan is that we can get a sponsor for each of us. Each of us have our own sponsor and match dollar for dollar what we put in that bucket. And that dollar for dollar will go to a different charity every single episode. So this episode is being donated to Copline because it's our first one. The sponsors, the logos that you see below Steph and I, these are folks that sponsored this episode so that it was possible. So Ferocious Beard Company, which is ferociousbeard.com, peacemakercoffeecompany.com, Supreme Whiskey Stones, which while we were having our show, I am using my Whiskey Stone etched glass, whiskey glass, my cigar glass. Check them out. And Salty Dogs Apparel. See, Steph, I'm really good at this commercial stuff.
You're doing great.
Thanks, I appreciate it. So now that we've established what the buckets are for, we could free flow, allow the curses to flow, and it only counts for the F words. So there's a stack of ones behind Stephanie, so she is fully prepared for this to take off, for her to curse tremendously. So I know there's a lot of people. Len just said that bucket is going to fill up pretty fast.
Thank you, Len. That was very, very kind of you to go ahead and write in and just start it off. Fuck you, Len.
That's the first $1. And Dawn says just throw a blank check in there. Patty Murphy says, Steph, you need a bigger bucket. I would agree. We were on the phone for about, 45 minutes.
This is incredible. These are my peeps that are throwing me under the bus right now. Incredible.
They have no faith in you whatsoever. None.
My brother's watching. He's going to be very good. He is right now absolutely mortified, but he will not write in.
Well, so I think what we need to talk about is, we definitely need to talk about what is up with your logo. What is the significance behind this Yellow Brick Road logo with Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz and the other logo that we played with that beautiful video that was made? So tell us, what's that about?
So I told you I've been doing this for about 30 years. So when I first started working with law enforcement, so your worst case scenario is that you get a person that's mandated to see you. They have absolutely no desire. The department basically gives them an ultimatum, so it's setting you up for an absolute disaster. So to boot on top of that epic shit show would be the fact that the individual is 64 years old. So at 65, have to leave law enforcement. So he was now mandated to me for the last year of his career. And if he did not continue to see me, they were going to pension him out. So it would not give him a full pension. Mm-hmm. So when he first came in, he was obviously an older gentleman, seasoned, and had absolutely no use for me. I was also, go back in my life, I was 30 years younger. So certainly looked a little bit younger as well. And he came in, and when he yelled, you just shook. He was just frightening.
Right.
So, um, so as time went on, obviously, had to be there. I started talking about different things. So I learned relatively early on. He uh, he had patrolled a very small bedroom community um, back east, and 6 months into his career, so now you've got to go back, like 55 years at this point. He was involved in a shooting.
Mm.
I don't think there had ever been a shooting. Don't think there has been one since then. So after the shift was over with, he shot at the suspect, hit the suspect, did not kill the suspect, and he ended up staying out there that night for a while longer, what have you. After investigation, he ended up going to his best friend's house, and his best friend poured him his first drink.
Mm.
And from that night on, game on. And you kind of go through his life, and there is a divorce. The wife had left with the best friend, left him with the children. It's just a series of events. The wife comes back years later. Again, look at the time period. Wife wanted the children, and he fought for the kids. That he fought for them in court. Obviously, did not get the kids, particularly back then, and lost that. So you have these series of losses and these series of other things that are going on. So pretty clearly, he was dealing with undiagnosed PTSD, and he had no relationship with his children by that point. By the time he came in to see me, and so in trying to figure this out and truly looking at the carnage this man had left behind, I remember getting into a I like to say heated discussion. I would say spirited, as he and I had many spirited conversations. And he finally just started yelling, and he said, "Don't you understand? I didn't want them to miss me."
Mm.
And that was it was his defense mechanism, because he really believed that he was going to die in the line of duty, and he didn't want the children to ever kind of miss him. So, so our relationship kind of became really unique. And his best friend actually was now in the hospital, and it was close to my office. So I said, "You're going to be going over there afterwards?" And he very quickly said no. And I said, "Why wouldn't you go see him?" And he's like, "Because I can't do anything for him." So I said, if he told you he was scared and he needed, that's all I got out of that sentence. And he then looked at me and he said, "I would stand until I dropped." And then I realized that I was looking at the wizard, that behind the curtain was this gentle old man that would truly give anybody anything that they needed.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started thinking, well, what's the only thing that an officer wants to do at the end of a day? Go home, Dorothy.
Yeah.
Most loyal canine, Toto, never left her side. And then I realized that they didn't know if they had the heart, the brains, or the courage to do what was going to be asked of them. Hence how the Wizard of Oz was born. And then I realized that it was my job to look over them, that I had become Glinda, and that I would never leave them alone, and that we don't know where that path is going to take them, and it's truly about the way, and that they're always looked after.
Right.
So hence how the Wizard of Oz was born. So if you came into my office, you would see this absolutely crazy, bizarre amount of Wizard of Oz stuff. And and I always forget, because it's my back's towards all of it. So if I don't tell this story, people are like, "The fuck's the deal with the flying monkeys, man?" So anyway, that's kind of how the Wizard of Oz was born.
There goes another $1.
Yeah, there we go. So anyway, so kind of cool.
Yeah. That when you told me about that, I was like, we gotta tell the fans about that. Wondering if there is an internet outage or what is going on. Let me see something. Love the Wizard of Oz from Tracy. Cammy, yeah, I do need a bathtub. And you guys got to keep us honest, too. You got to make sure that you're keeping on top of us, because I have not cursed once yet, which is extremely rare for me. But it's going to come. I'm gonna drop it. Don't worry. So, Steph, I'm thinking, why don't we talk about, current events currently right now in law enforcement right now. I think this is probably, you've been around a lot longer than I have. You're older than I am.
Thanks, Nick.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
That's very kind of you.
Yeah,
And if anything, you're like baiting me. You are just baiting me.
I would never do that, Steph. I would never do that. I think 80 is the new 20.
Well, next week, Nick, we're going to go over the Botox stuff, and we're going to see if the shit actually works, to see how these wrinkles go. Because I'm absolutely convinced that nobody should be able to know whether I'm happy, sad, smiling, frowning. That if Botox works properly, you just have that one blank face on. Kind of like how you know how a cop's doing. The happy face, the sad face, it's all the same face. You're like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
I'm doing great, thank you.
I can't get that Botox thing. I don't understand that. That can't be safe. That can't be safe. Can't be safe.
Isn't it like snake venom? Which kind of really...
No, it's not. Is it?
I don't know.
Is it?
I like to believe it's snake venom.
I gotta look that up, because I don't think they would inject you with snake venom.
Well, think about it, because snake venom actually would paralyze you. Somebody's going to get on it.
Yeah, could somebody look that up? Is that actually true? Because that sounds... Why would you put snake venom in your body? Like, that sounds...
Why do you put half the shit in your body that you do, Nick?
I don't know. Not me. I'm an angel. I don't do anything. I haven't gone through any of my dollars yet. Let me see. So, just today's news about Minnesota is that a lot of, 100 officers so far have filed for PTSD disability through Minnesota because of the riots, protests, or whatever. I don't know what you want to call it.
I think they're protests. I really don't think our cops have an issue with protests. I mean, when you look at, very few people remember that the Dallas Five were shot and killed during a Black Lives Matter protest.
Right.
Cops don't have an issue with protecting the constitutional rights of America. That's the oath. I mean, Nick, you know that better. God, you know that so much better than I do. It's not about that. It truly is about when they're rioting and looting and they turn it into violence. There's no place for the violence. There's certainly, it's what America has been built on, is the ability to have freedom of speech, given certain, parameters of that. But and law enforcement is there to protect those constitutional rights of all of us. So I certainly would say the riots.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that I have guarded a lot of protests, and protests to me are, you say your piece, you hold up your signs, you do what you got to do, cause a little bit of a disruption, let us get our overtime, and then then get back in your Prius or your electric vehicle, and move on with your day and get the fuck out. But these are not.
That would be. I would.
But these are not.
The left coast gets into their electric vehicle. I believe the East Coast gets into their V8s.
Yes, the trucks.
And the Midwest just gets into their trucks.
Yeah.
And they don't tolerate a whole lot of the violent protesting anyway. But
yeah, I mean, I think the big issue is that the problem that we have is that we don't have strong leadership behind officers while they're out there guarding these protests or riot. Well, the majority of them are riots at this point. You're creating destruction. You're causing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of damage. I just read an article today that Minnesota went crying to the federal government asking for aid to help rebuild Minnesota when they just basically told the Minnesota Police Department to stand down and allow these folks to destroy downtown Minneapolis. And the federal government was like, go fucking pound sand. Another dollar. And I think the problem is that too many chiefs of police are too afraid to lose their job. They're too afraid to stand up to politicians who think that they know police tactics, that think that they know what the police should and shouldn't do, and they don't. They have no clue what we do. A lot of them haven't even gone out on a ride-along, let alone spend a day inside of a police department and see what goes on. So I can only imagine what the mental toll is for these officers that are out there getting screamed at, shit thrown at them, piss thrown at them. Just the worst of the worst.
I mean, tennis balls with concrete in it, like that's just evil. Did
you see the Chicago? I think it was Chicago, the Chicago police station where they surrounded the police station, or maybe it was Detroit. It was one of those. They surrounded the police station. They chained the door shut. They chained all the doors shut. And these officers were trapped inside of their own police station for 6 hours.
I think there were 7. Yeah.
Yeah, 6 or 7 hours. Yeah. And then when they finally got them out, they found gas cans all around the building. They were going to light the police station on fire with these officers inside. I mean, would you have ever, in your wildest imagination, ever thought that we would get to that point with society, that the people that are really between anarchy and justice, your protectors, are now the ones on the defense? I just never in my wildest imagination ever, even in the worst times.
It's interesting because when I was talking to other civilians about that thin blue line, I would tell you there's a horrible misconception of what that line stands for. I mean, people believe that line is so that officers can cover for other officers.
Yes.
That thin blue line is, I got your back. What they have no idea is that thin blue line is exactly what you said, is it stands between anarchy and civilization, and it is law enforcement that stands in that thin blue line that separates it. And now with the eroding of it, I remember, I had a vivid picture when you were talking that I had the honor and the horror of going down on September 22nd to the pile in New York City. And I remember looking at this scene. There was still smoke that was coming off the pile. And all I remember thinking was, this isn't my country.
Yeah.
Like, this looked like all those history books of like war-torn Europe after World War II. And it just, there is nothing that I could wrap my head around that this was New York.
Yeah.
And I remember I brought back many different officers to Ground Zero to help them process and go through what they needed to. And it wasn't until last year, actually, it was a friend of mine who's retiring chief from Port Authority, who told me that she wanted me to come down and spend the day with her. And she wanted me to go back. I had never been back to Ground Zero. I never went back into the building. And she said, what you did for all of us, we wanted to do for you. And it was just one of those incredibly difficult, emotional, somber days for me. But it also showed me truly that we are one resilient group. And as we're going through this as a country, as we're going through this as individuals, and we're going through this as people, I just have to, believe, and not because I believe in fairy tales and, think that around a kumbaya can solve a whole lot of problems. But if history really is the predictor of a future, which I do believe, is we're a resilient population, and we will be able to get through this together. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, my only thing is I think with this time around, though, I think we're doing so much damage to this profession that before George Floyd, even I want to say even before Ferguson, recruitment was at an all-time low in this profession. Salaries are dwindling in this profession. Pensions are dwindling. Benefits are dwindling. Every time that there's a chance to cut healthcare benefits for first responders, not just police, firemen and medics and so on, dispatchers, they're cutting them. Your national average for law enforcement right now, I think, is right around $38,000 a year. Who the fuck wants to do this job for $37,000 a year? I earned that dollar. And I think the problem is, I worry about the future of what we're going to get, because we're going to have to settle. Eventually, we're going to have to settle. And that's my big concern is are we going to wind up having a majority of officers in departments that are 22, 23 years old with no life experience? And that's scary. That's a scary, scary thing.
Some of the stuff that I learned in dealing, nationally with law enforcement is that we've got areas in this country that we have officers who, I don't know if there's anything on the screen.
There we go. It's coming back on.
Okay.
All right, we are back. Sorry about that, folks. We had a temporary lapse in internet coverage. Anybody have a direct pipeline to Verizon, you're more than welcome to message the CEO that where I live, Verizon is not very good. So we were talking about my big major concern, and you're right, which is in one moment they're in a convenience store, you got kids, which are basically 22, 23-year-olds. And the reason why they're getting hired in record numbers is because they can pass a background, because they've never been in a fight before. They've never, they have no life experience. So it's very easy for them to pass a background check. And I almost think with the times that we have right now, those aren't the officers that we need out on the street. We need mature individuals out there that have been through life experience, that know what it's like to struggle with bills, that know hard times. And I could go both ways with that, though, because
I was going to say, I could definitely play devil's advocate with you.
I can't, and I put something in my book. I put in there that millennials are what are going to fix law enforcement. You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer, and I think millennials will probably be what fix this profession is because they've grown up around suicide. They've grown up around being okay to ask for help. They've grown up around antidepressants. They've grown up around watching their idols die of suicide and drug overdoses, right? And they have grown up around mom and dad fighting in front of them, not in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and some parts of the early 90s where you only fought behind closed doors in some homes. I'm not saying that's everybody's home. So they've grown up around domestics. They've grown up around arguments with between parents.
So I'm gonna give you the profile of a cop anyway.
Yeah, actually, we need to get into that because you told me about
that actually addresses what you're talking about, but that addresses for the decades before as well. So the profile of a cop is typically somebody who has grown up in crisis, does well in crisis, doesn't know how to live without crisis, somebody who has issues with a father figure or significant loss early in life, somebody who has history of abuse, emotional, physical, sexual, or neglect. Mm-hmm. It makes for a great cop, makes for a very difficult home life. And when we look at kind of what greatest stressors are in law enforcement, and again, not everybody has that profile.
Right.
So, I don't, I understand that, but I think it's really important to look at that profile. And typically because we have a lot of dual career people coming on the job as well, with military experience.
Right.
But these are people who truly take this job because they want to help.
Mm-hmm.
They want to make a difference. They want to protect. They want to.
Do you think that's everybody though that joins this profession?
I don't think the word everybody applies to anything.
Yeah, I think a
And the
lot.
answer is absolutely not.
Yeah, I think a lot of them like how they look in a uniform and like to do TikTok, and I think they like to do a lot of pictures and movies inside of their
You
cruiser.
are fucking jaded. You are absolutely fucking jaded.
That's $2. Damn.
You know,
Damn. And
no.
Clay hit it right on the head. I'm gonna go with what Clay put a comment on here, that it should be 25 plus or military. And Clay, a lot of law enforcement agencies are going to that because the military, if you do, like, I know I'm in the D.C. capital region. In D.C., if you don't have college, they'll accept military because they know that if you made it through boot camp and you did your stint in the military, you're halfway decent. Like you're a halfway decent human being. We hope.
So I'm not the guru of this, but I believe what has been shot down is that age requirement.
I think it's
So
illegal.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
So what was put in place, which was interesting, was a 4-year degree. Because how old are you typically when you graduate with a 4-year degree?
Right.
So that's how they were getting around and circumventing
But
the age requirement.
I'll argue about that, which is now that I'm out of the profession and I'm looking for a job. Anybody in the DC capital region need a subject matter expert, please email me at nick@rollcallroom.com. The issue that I have is that now that we've become so dependent on a college education, that I'm experiencing coming out of the profession that I don't have a bachelor's or a master's degree. I am less worthy than a 24-year-old that's coming out of college.
I am not saying that college is needed by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm saying is that that's how they circumvented
I agree.
the laws.
Yeah.
But, the problem with college is that college typically has you stresses for you to become an independent thinker. That
Yes.
is not necessarily what is going to jive in a police world.
You're not allowed to think independently as a law
The
enforcement officer.
and the questioning a supervisor is not always beneficial. I mean, don't get me wrong. I certainly think that there is a need. Obviously, there's right, there's wrong. There's a whole lot of that one needs to be able to think for themselves, and to the whole thing about being accountable for one's actions, which I believe is one of the greatest problems we see in our country today, is the fact that very few people choose to take responsibility for their own actions, and they blame everybody else and everything else for what has occurred or what have you. So,
Steph, where were you when I was doing the Roll Call Room podcast and I was criticizing my command staff every episode? You could have saved my job. You could have saved me my job. Where were you? You were absentee.
I was probably talking to patients.
Saving lives? Saving lives? It's a little bit more important.
No, nothing's more important, because your life is also important. So the answer is, and this is why we're doing this show, is because the more people we can touch, the more information we can get out there, the less nicks there are going to be. The less people fall through the cracks that shouldn't fall through the cracks. So that's what we're here for. And it hurts my heart, because I wish I was there for you. I wish I did know you. I wish that I understood that, because truly understanding leadership, I think I got schooled very quickly on leadership with one of my guys who has a dual career, and he and his supervisor got into a little bit of a conversation over him, and his supervisor had said to him that he had done something and what have you, and he said, "I am your leader. You need to respect me as such." And he's recounting the story to me, and he said, I made it very clear to him that I was a retired first sergeant,
Mm-hmm.
and that sergeant first class, and that under no circumstances was he actually his leader.
Yes.
He said, "You are my supervisor." He said, "I will tell you that I led." He said, "And as a leader, I knew every single person's first name, their last name, their spouse's name, their girlfriend's names, important dates." And he went on and he said, "I ask you one question. I have been here for 20 some odd years. I have taken the same day off every year. What day is it?" And he couldn't
Couldn't
answer it.
answer it,
And he
right?
said, "Beth," and he gave him the date and he said, "It's my anniversary." And he said, "I knew that." He said, "So, sir, you have all the respect as my supervisor, but please don't ever refer to yourself as a leader."
Yep. We
And just beautiful,
yeah,
beautiful.
we have I've been in the law enforcement profession. I'm out of it now, but I was in the law enforcement profession for 20 years. And we have a really really big pool of managers. Really big pool. But when it boils down to it, as far as leaders, it's very, very far and few between. There are very few people that I would follow into the gates of hell, that I would blindly run into gunfire for because they told me to do it. And that's sad because now, and I talk about this on my show all the time, is we've always had very, very weak leaders in law enforcement, but now it's under a huge microscope because now we're in tough times. We're in wartime. We're in times where riots are happening. We're having blue flu. We're having all these different things that are going on, COVID. And these poor leaders slash managers are being exposed. And they don't like it. They didn't on my show. That's what ultimately got me kicked out of my agency is that they do not like you talking badly or answering back. And exactly what you said is, we're a paramilitary organization or profession. You do what I say, and that's it. Cammy just put up, would I have stayed anyway if you had given, if you were in my life at the time when I was going through what I was going through. I wouldn't have stayed with the agency. I would not have, because it was destroying my mental health. And the part about being in an agency that treats you poorly is it's like a domestic relationship. You want so badly for it to work. You want so badly to fix it. You want so badly for them to change. And you just take it. You take it. You take it. And you're just like, one more year. And, that's just how it is. It's like an abusive relationship. Robbie just said you're not dropping enough F-bombs, by the way.
Nice. Um, it, the other thing, though, is, in a domestic relationship or anything like you're discussing,
Mm-hmm.
is you only have control over yourself. I mean, this is where people get incredibly frustrated,
Mm-hmm.
is that you've got to look at what you have control over.
Mm-hmm.
You have control, as you did, over you can resign. You have control over staying. You have some control over the conditions that you're willing to stay under.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what becomes really, really important for everybody is kind of homing in on that, is looking at what they're going through and saying, can I live with this? Can I be true to myself
Mm-hmm.
and stay here? And quite honestly, if I'm going to, I've learned in my own world that I'm going to have to eat a shit sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, how much shit am I going to eat? Can I at least make it myself so that I can, kind of skew it so that the bread at least is good?
Yeah.
And, how thick does it have to be? Because everybody has a limit.
Yeah.
And we eat shit in our personal lives, we eat shit in our professional lives. And truly, I will always say the good of the many must outweigh the good of the one or the few.
Yeah.
And that is how I determine how much shit I'm going to eat, is because when it comes to just me, I'm pretty intolerant of eating shit. When it comes to the many, I'll eat.
Yeah.
I have to.
Well, that's the way I was when I was a sergeant. I ate a lot of shit sandwiches for my people. And then when it came time for me to serve them a shit sandwich, I tried to make it as digestible and as scrumptious as possible. And it was the worst thing being a sergeant, which is passing down shit from up above that you're just like, what the fuck Where are you guys coming up with this shit? And that's another buck for me. But I will tell you, I had therapy last week with my therapist, and I don't mind sharing this, which was something that she said to me that was very interesting, and that's where I got the domestic relationship from when it comes to the agency, is, I don't know, those of you that are out there that can relate to this, great. If you can't, good for you that you don't. If you've ever been in a relationship with somebody that you want to break up with them, but you just don't have the balls to do it, so you're just hoping that that person does it for you, that's where I was with my agency. I was to the point where I was like, you know what? I started the podcast. I started causing a lot of waves. And I think subliminally, I was pushing the limits to make them make the move instead of me abandon the job. So
it's interesting because, unless I'm wrong, which I'm not, by the way, is almost every cop is a control freak. Would you say that's true?
for me,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So you gave up control.
Mm-hmm. Big time.
So you weren't true to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You gave up the control because you wanted somebody else to do it rather than being able to empower yourself. That is so incredibly important.
Mm-hmm.
When I have officers that disclose that they have been molested, we have no statute of limitations. As long as that molester still has access to children, there is no statute of limitations. And one of the things that I always, encourage them is to do the report themselves, because that becomes the first way that they take control of their lives, and it empowers them that they did something, because you go from victim to valor.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether or not your attitude and the way you see your department and the world would have been different if you would have said, you know what, guys, good luck. Good luck.
Well, here's the backstory is I had left my department once before on my own accord, and I came back because I regretted the decision.
Did you do it in a huff?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hence why the best time to break up with somebody is when things are going well.
Yeah, and I did it when it was at its. I had done it at the worst when the department head was at its worst with me, and I stormed out of there. And then I was gone for 2 weeks, Steph. I didn't last 2 fucking weeks. There's another $1. And I was like, I missed it. I missed everything, including the abuse, which is super weird. And
I'm going to say that there's something that probably from your past that made that very comfortable.
Yes. Yeah, I match a lot of the criteria that you... Yeah. When you told me that on the phone, I sat and while I was smoking a cigar...
You're like, I'm doing a show with this bitch.
Yeah, I was like, fuck.
She's joining me. She ain't going against me.
It's another $1. I was like, fuck. And do I have to pay another one? Yeah, I have to pay another one. Yeah. I was like, why am I paying my therapist every week when I could just call Steph up and talk to her? But I will say this. I will say the hardest part was for me after surviving suicide was admitting that I needed to go and talk to somebody, admitting to somebody that I needed help. And that's tough for us because we're Superman, we're Batman. You never see Superman or Batman go, crawling for help or anything. And it was tough. It was tough to do that. But the other thing is, and my message on my show and in my book is, you may not find the right therapist the first shot. You may not jive with them on the first shot. And that's not a reason to give up. You've got to continue to keep shopping for the right therapist. I got very lucky. My first shot at a therapist, I got very lucky. Her and I related to each other. I just have a better time trusting females than I do males. Nothing against males or anything, but that's just how I am. But I think...
I also, honestly, I think that men have an easier time just socially emoting to a female. I just think it's more socially acceptable.
Well, I think it's also the stigma, which is that when you talk to another guy,
Right.
in the back of your head, you're going to say to yourself, "This guy's sitting here saying I'm just being a big punk."
Go ahead. Say, oh no.
Yeah, I was
No,
going to say
no,
the
no.
other P word.
You were.
I
Yeah.
was. I'm a
Yeah.
gentleman. I'm a gentleman. Uh, Natalie said, "Did you ever consider going to a different department or just focused on your own?" So here's the thing, Natalie, with that. Your question is did I ever consider? So the way that I left my agency, unfortunately, I am blacklisted in the profession. So I can never work in law enforcement again because I've publicly come out and said that I had a mental health issue. And that's what's wrong with the profession is you're demeaned and you're blacklisted for going to get help. And then there were other things on my exit. There were some choice words between me and my former chief. And, every time somebody would call for a recommendation, I'm sure it's not going to be a glowing one. But you know what? What spawned from that was a very successful podcast, a very successful book. It's only been released for 3 days. I'm going to brag for a minute, Steph. It is on Amazon Kindle, the number 3 book in the country right now for mental health. I'm super, super proud of that. I woke up this morning and I text Stephanie a picture of it. I said, look what I just woke up to. Number 3 in mental health and number 5 in law books. So good things happen as a result of it. Do I want to go back in the profession? I really don't think so. I think in the current climate of law enforcement, I would either get fired fairly quickly or I would resign again because I'm not good at keeping my mouth shut when things are wrong. And I believe in constructive criticism. The name of the book is called, somebody just asked what the name of the book is. It's called Police Mental Barricade. A Survivor's Guide to Poor Law Enforcement Leadership. And if you go on rollcallroom.com, you can click over. There's ways to get it on rollcallroom.com. So if I have a very, very bad habit of giving people constructive criticism. Doesn't matter if you're a lieutenant, a captain, a deputy chief, or a chief. And the problem in our profession is nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to hear you tell them that their decisions are toxic. They don't want to hear it. And that's a problem. So Len just commented to you, Steph. When my chief found out I was seeing Steph, he took my gun and sent me for a fit for duty exam. And that, my friends, is the problem. I kept my suicide to myself. I kept taking mental health medication. If you read my book, there's an entire chapter on mental health antidepressants. I went through multiple different medications because I couldn't find the right one. It did different things to me. It had different side effects. I couldn't say anything to anybody at work while I was sick. So I was burning sick leave. And then my lieutenant was getting on my ass about taking time off. So now I started to worry about losing my job because I was taking too much sick leave. And I couldn't say anything to the department because I knew they were going to do what they did to Len. They were going to send me for a fit for duty.
So with Len, so kind of good news, bad news on this one. So his chief, which you certainly discussed, this was kind of a whole new arena for them. The good news is that the people that do the fitness for duties, or the people that he was sent to do a lot of our fitness for duties in this state, absolutely love cops that are in treatment. Because as they will tell you, that there's no healthier cop than a cop that is talking to somebody. Like, that's not who they worry about anymore. It is the cop like you described, Nick, yourself, who wouldn't talk to anybody, kind of on the down low, was getting, psych meds. And I have a huge issue with GPs prescribing psych meds. And this is not a, professional, this is not the clinician, but, Shit, if you break your legs, you go to your GP to set it, you go to an orthopedist.
Mm-hmm.
If you need psych meds, damn it, go to a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Because they get it. That's what they keep up on. And occupational health has an absolute list of what is acceptable and what is not on duty.
Right.
So, breaking down that stigma years and years ago, the lead psychiatrist for the FBI, and there's only actually one, but this probably goes back 20 years. I remember listening to him lecture, and he said, I much rather have a depressed agent on an antidepressant in treatment with a gun than a depressed agent not in treatment with a gun.
Yeah.
So simple. So simple. But the stigma has been there. I mean, and thank goodness for the people that did the fitness for duties. The turnaround time was literally by the time he had left the door and what have you, he was cleared. But nobody should have to go through that fear.
Right.
I was dealing with cyber crimes. You want to talk about the shittiest of all jobs? Do cyber work.
Yeah.
So that you never get the perpetrator because it's being made in some foreign garage where they're molesting these kids. So you're typically not ever going to find them. You can only get the downloads. Before they had the programs where they actually were able to look at the images to flag them,
Mm-hmm.
they were literally looking at tens of thousands of images, trying to go home, connect to their own children, have this normal life when they're seeing all this shit that is completely abnormal.
Right.
And so one of the guys who headed up cyber, he was the head of his unit, that he told everyone in cyber that he was in therapy. He told every one of them to find a therapist, that he would give them time off while on duty to go to therapy. He ended up going to his chief to address this because he was having nightmares.
Yeah.
And a whole big thing like, oh my God, we need to get you out of this unit, blah, blah. He's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You just need to kind of understand.
Yeah.
Because somehow or another, the only people in the world that can do this job and have no emotions are sociopaths.
Yeah.
That is less than 10% of our population are truly sociopaths. Otherwise, there is no fucking way that anybody that has any type of emotion can do this job and not be affected by it. And yet you are judged for being affected. How does that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. And you owe $1. And I will tell you this, when my career was coming to an end, I got a phone call from my chief. This is a comment that Cammie made. Cammie made a comment on here. They take the gun because they don't want the officer using it on themselves. God forbid they get them help first, which is very true, Cammie. And then Len replied, they don't give a shit about the officer, just their own potential liability if they kill themselves with the department weapon. And I can tell you that from when my career was ending, I got a phone call from my chief of police, and I had tendered my resignation, and he, was talking to me about not accepting my resignation and wanted to know where my gun was. And it was all about liability. It was all about, he was worried that I was going to attempt suicide again and use the department's weapon, and then there'd be a scandal. And I get it for extreme cases when somebody openly turns around and says, hey, listen, I'm not in the right place and I'm thinking about it. But too many times, departments are worried about their own liability than the officer's mental health.
So I'm going to piggyback on that because I've had many conversations with chiefs, with prosecutors about this.
Mm-hmm.
So the interesting message is they take the duty weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, you have no hair. Okay,
yeah, I'm bald.
Just a quick aside. Very funny. So it sends a message to the officer that says, we don't want you to kill yourself with our weapon, but it's okay that you kill yourself with yours.
Yes.
So here is the other. So then I had an incredible conversation because, like you, I will say that I have pissed in more bowls of Cheerios not knowing it was breakfast time than most people could could piss in a lifetime period.
Yeah.
So I was going up to do a lecture on on um, on critical incidents and actually taking the firearm and getting an SOP in place on psych services, et cetera, et cetera. So when I got up there, so the prosecutor himself actually, I feel very strongly that after an officer is involved in a shooting, obviously the weapon has to be removed because it's evidence
Right.
about regunning. Whether you're regunned at a scene, if it's safe, if there's no gun there. But anyway, there's no reason not to do it. So prosecutors made it clear that the person could not get a gun until after they had seen psych services, which could be days.
Right.
So and they were confiscating all of their personal firearms.
Hmm.
So I knew the conversation was going to come up about removing and not regunning with the departmental weapon. So I called up Dr. Violante, who is like the leading guru in law enforcement suicide, and I said, Dr. Violante, I'm going to this meeting. I just need to know, do we have any documented cases of officers that have killed themselves after shootings? And he said, we don't. I said, I didn't think so. I just wanted to make sure. So I'm not speaking from my ass. I try not to do that. So when the prosecutor said that they were not only taking the duty weapon and not regunning, but they were going to be taking all personal firearms as well. So I said to him, listen, I was listening to the highway on the way here. It takes me about 40 minutes to get to this facility from where I live. Did we lose the Second Amendment between the time I left my house and the time I entered this building? Because if we did, there's a huge issue in my home. And he's like, why would you say that? I'm like, what right do you have taking that officer's personal weapons? Now, don't get me wrong. If that person constitutes a danger to self or others, game on.
Yeah.
So then get that. So while they're in the hospital, because they're typically in the hospital after shooting, get a goddamn psychiatrist or licensed clinician to talk to them, clear them, and be done. The liability's mine.
Yeah.
So when they're mandated to me, I have to write a note. Here's what my note says. Officer Smith has been seeing me on a weekly basis. He's dealing with his and is making progress. He's dealing with all psychosocial stressors and does not constitute a danger to self or others. And if they're out, that I request that they are able to participate in any activity that reduces stress without fear of retaliatory action with the department. Because my guys are like, I'm basically on house arrest. I can't go work out. Well, their mental health, they need to go work out. They need to do whatever.
Right.
So I finally said to one of the chiefs, he's like, well, you need to tell me whether or not the officer, whether we should be removing his gun. I'm like, Chief, you never have to worry about that. I will be calling you if that person constitutes a danger to self or other, because my license supersedes their chiefliness.
Yeah.
Period.
You know what's interesting about that statistic, that the doctor that you spoke to, which is how many officers after an officer involved shooting kill themselves, which is 0. Isn't it amazing that the reason for that is because they have so many resources thrown at them from the department because of liability, but we can't do that on a regular basis for our officers. It's only when it's beneficial for the jurisdiction or the department that you work for.
That we'll have to cover on another show.
Yeah, because we're hitting an hour.
That's a whole workman's comp issue.
Oh,
that
huge.
Is another
huge.
Epic shit show.
That's the reason why we don't have. That's why a lot of states don't have a PTSD workers' comp or worker PTSD disability.
That we can absolutely spend because the system breaks down. I actually was blessed to be able to testify before before Congress. The Attorney General had set up, the Commission for Mental Wellness for law enforcement, and it was over at the first testimony was in Miami in February with the IACP, and it's interesting because you get the you talk about PTSD and you talk about mental health, and then you talk about getting officers help. So that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
What people don't realize, so as a clinician, so everybody's like, yeah, we just need to get them help. Well, let me tell you what help looks like. So now I've got to deal with the insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the insurance company, first of all, you need to find a culturally competent therapist. And Joe Shit the Ragman can't do this line of work at all. So now you've hit an expertise. Well, fuck paying for an expertise. We're just going to, you should work for $10. So now we get somebody who actually, they've got out of network benefits, they make arrangements, whatever it is. We now go through their insurance policy. Now I've got insurance companies that are monitoring. They either want notes. People don't realize when they go in network that those individuals have signed contracts with the insurance companies, and those contracts specifically talk about what they can disclose and what they can't. So I have remained out of network to protect the officers, to protect myself as well from having insurance companies invade. And then you get audited. And then the audits continue. Then I can't see them for an hour because an hour is that seems to be a longer period of time. It's not in the norm. Again, the algorithms, I'm out of algorithms. So now you get audited again. It is insane to try and get the men and women the true help they need. So you can testify, you can talk about getting them into treatment. You need boots on the goddamn ground with me in my practice to see the fucking hoops that I've got to jump through to take care of my own. Because when they come in the door, they are my own. Done on that rant.
Yeah, and you owe $2.
I lost track. I thought it was only one.
Nope. Our fans
Okay,
keep
okay.
us honest. So, that wraps it up. We're at an hour. So what we're going to do is, at the end of the episode, we are going to tally up our fuck it bucket and see where we're at. So we have Robbie is going to be sponsoring Steph, her fuck it bucket. So I don't have a sponsor for mine. So if anybody wants to reach out and sponsor, these are for donations. So not only are Steph and I going to give this money to the charity for the week, which is Copline, and those of you that don't know what Copline is, it is a fantastic resource for officers to call that are in crisis.
And even those that aren't in crisis, and we set it up because we believe that we want to be there for low hanging fruit and high hanging fruit. The most important thing is that you are never alone. Copline is 24/7, 7 days a week, only answered by retired, vetted, and trained law enforcement officers.
That's important. Natalie, thank you. Natalie is going to. Natalie, I had two people chime up. So, Cassie, you can do next week if you want. So, my total, because I know mine is less than yours. Before I say my total, can I get a couple of estimates on the chat? How many I have and how many Stephanie has? I already know what my total is, so I'm excited. While we're waiting for some comments, because this is it's slow to respond, so I'm going to give quite a bit of you some time to comment. While we're doing that, I do want to say again, thank you to our sponsors, which is Ferocious Beard Company, which is ferociousbeard.com. I use their products, as you can see with my lovely beard that I have. They reached out. They're out of Fort Worth, Texas. They sponsored to have their logo on this episode. In addition, Peacemaker Coffee, which is peacemakercoffeecompany.com. I love Peacemaker Coffee. They are a sponsor of my show. Supreme Whiskey Stones, okay? So Cammie, a fan, had this beautiful whiskey cigar glass made up. It's etched with the logo. It's beautiful, beautifully done. And it's got a little space for my cigar. And a fan got me these bullets that are ice cubes. And Supreme Whiskey Stones, they are on all of their links and everything will be on. So don't you worry about that. So, Supreme Whiskey Stones, thank you so much for sponsoring. And last but not least is Salty Dogs Apparel. If you don't know who Salty Dog Apparel is, please check them out. They do a great job. They are LEO owned. It's a law enforcement company. So is Peacemaker Coffee, and so is Supreme Whiskey Stones. I always like to try and find sponsors of officers that are doing a side hustle, that are just trying to make a buck. So, all right. So I got a couple. All right. Richard says Steph has 10. Natalie says 8 for you, 4 for me. Clay says 10 for Steph, Nick 12. Really, Clay? Come on. Susanna says 4 for me, Steph 10. Natalie says her husband is panicking with the total. So, and she chose to sponsor me. Don't worry, Natalie, you're okay. So, the general consensus is that you have 10. So, how many do you have, Steph?
I had 7, but I'm going to say if they said 10, when I'm going on.
You had 7? How is that possible?
I'll round up. I'll go to the 10. I'm going to say that they're going to keep me honest.
Because I have,
and I'm not counted.
I have 7. I have 7. I was very well behaved.
Then I'm going to go with 10.
All right. So we have raised. I have a New York City public education. So 17 times 2, we raised $34 from this episode to Copline. We appreciate it. Folks, this show will be every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Steph and I will commit to do this show, whether or not it's in our own homes or on the road, one way or another. We will do this show. We are committed to doing this show. If you are an officer in crisis or you need help, there's multiple different resources for you to reach out to. I strongly encourage you to reach out to Copline. Bluehelp.org does a good job with referring people, so on and so forth. So,
and Copline's number is 1-800-COPLINE, which is 267-5463. Again, 1-800-COPLINE. So,
awesome. So you guys know every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, you can tune in here, and we will be here every single time. Folks, I want to thank you for reaching out again, for tuning in. And we look forward to your comments, emails about how we can improve the show, things that you want to hear on the next show. Thank you again, and take good care of each other.
Thank you. Be safe. Be healthy.
Awesome.